Captain Hugh Mulzac was an important person in the early U.S. civil rights struggles of the people of color. He was a Vincentian born, but he was the first Black American to obtain a master's license. This was the rank of captain, which qualified him to skipper an ocean cargo ship. Most importantly, he was the leader in obtaining better wages and working conditions for seamen of all races. He was immeasurably immense in opening the doors for a more equitable and just working environment in the merchant marine service. This was in the early 1940s when the only jobs at sea for ethnic minorities were cooks and stewards. Captain Mulzac's early days in the United States were frustrating. Part of his dimension was his multiracial policies. Both black and white seafarers were apparently treated equally by the labor body. It was easy for Mulzac to support multiracialism. Captain Mulzac undoubtedly observed the injustices and discriminatory practices against people of color in the U.S. at the time. Captain Mulzac fought and fought until he was given the first ship named the Booker T. Washington. However, there were stipulations. He was supposedly asked to have an all-black crew, as he affectionately called it, a Jim Crow arrangement. He said no. He wanted a more experienced crew, which meant for him he wanted a mixed crew. The Booker T carried vital supplies such as tanks, aircrafts, and ammunition for the European front. It made 22 successful round trips crossing North Atlantic. He managed to avoid being torpedoed by the German submarines. The sub sank hundreds of other cargo boats with the loss of many equally courageous and hard-working sailors as those in the Navy. The efficient operation of the ship was a model for others to emulate. He was met in racism in many of the places he went. On his second voyage, he was given an overloaded ship in a 2-hour time frame with nothing to do but to leave New York. He was met with high winds, high seas, and a super bad storm. He asked the leader of the convoy, which he was in, to reduce the knot, which was undoubtedly unable to do. However, he had to disobey commands to stay with the convoy, and he safely brought his ship to the port. In the meantime, the two ships that were alongside him in the convoy was sunk by torpedoes by the German submarines. All in all, even though he brought his ship to port before the convoy, there was an investigation opened into why he left the convoy. After the investigation, he was congratulated. During his trips overseas, he was met with racism, as I said before. In Halifax, he was only able to go to the Jim Crow bars. He was only able to go to the theaters for colored people. So racism, even though he fought for racism in the United States, he was met with it when he left the United States and went to England, Liverpool, Halifax, and other places. Hugh Mulzac paved the way for many that would come after him. In the 1960s, there was a Vietnamese War that was underway. Many black soldiers were enlisted for the war. However, The war was repulsive to them and many went AWOL. Susan Snell, a Navy commander, she was court-martialed for giving a political statement while in her uniform. In the 1960s, that the Vietnamese War was underway, because of all the stuff that was happening in the war, hundreds of women and children were being killed. There was a dermatologist, there was a skin condition that was given to them by embalming that's caused this reaction. And so many of the black soldiers went AWOL. In the 1960s, the Vietnamese War was underway. Many of our soldiers were trained as dermatologists so that they will be able to treat the people, the women and the children there, to gain access to the Vietnamese people. However, part of the war against the Vietnamese included giving the people an embalm, which is a thing that's on their skin and creates this. And hundreds of women and children were being killed every day. So many of our black soldiers went AWOL. Susan Snell was court-martialed for giving a political statement while in her uniform. Many of the soldiers refused orders and resigned. Lots of people were killed in this war. Meanwhile, Dr. King back here in the United States was having a peaceful protest by refusing to ride the bus system. Stokely Carmichael was also an advocate of black empowerment. He was arrested multiple times. Dr. King was the first black public figure to speak out against the Vietnamese War. The racism was the central focus used in the attacks on the Vietnamese. Many sacrifices followed from Dr. King, Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, all died as a result of racism and in the fight against racism. It was no longer about race, Dr. King said. It was about economics, taking care of the poor, access to health care, education. By so doing, we were tampering with the wealthy's playground, dismantling the economic constraint. As long as a white man does it, says Malcolm X, it's all right. A black person, on the other hand, is supposed to have no feeling. When a black person strike back, he's considered an extremist. Many were taught to fear. Eventually, the Black Panther Party arose, mainly had to deal with capitalism in America. All of the freedom fighters were in prison. They were killing the remaining people. Women had to eventually take over. They were trying to get help to deal with the police, the landlords. The Black Panther played an important role in continuing the fight that Captain Hugh Mulzac started. It was one step forward, two steps backwards, because racism continued even up to today.